The Ottawa RV Expo is happening this weekend, and we'll see what some of the latest RV features are. And how about this? Catherine Clark is going to be here to talk about Care Canada's Walk in Her Shoes event, a very important event as well. I'm Dylan Black, so join us on Wednesday, won't you? 1, 6, and 11 p.m. Daytime Ottawa, Rogers TV.
The sun goes down in Pasadena, and I feel alive. I feel like I'm dreaming, and the sun comes up, and I'm still sleeping and alone.
This is Rogers TV, Ottawa.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. If I could ask members of council to take their seats, on va commencer la réunion dans une minute. We'll start the meeting in 1 minute. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Ottawa City Council for the 6th of February 2019. Bienvenue à la Conseil municipal pour la...
Welcome to City Council for Wednesday, February 6th, 2019.
Please rise for a moment of personal reflection. Thank you. Merci. A roll call, please, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Councillor Luloff.
Here.
Councillor Dudas.
Present.
Councillor Harder.
Here.
Councillor Sudds.
Here.
Councillor Elshantiri. Councillor Gower.
Here.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Present.
Councillor Shirelli.
Here.
Councillor Eglai.
Here.
Councillor Deans.
Here.
Councillor Tierney.
Present.
Councillor Fleury.
Ici.
Councillor McKenney.
Present.
Councillor Leeper.
Ici.
Councillor Brockington.
Here.
Councillor Menard.
Here.
Councillor Cloutier.
Présent.
Councillor Blais. Councillor DeRose.
Here.
Councillor Moffat.
Here.
Councillor Meehan.
Here.
Councillor Hubley.
Here.
Mayor Watson.
Ici.
Le quorum est tient, Monsieur le maire.
Merci. Déclaration
You have quorum?
of interests, including those originally rising from prior meetings. None. Regrets. Councillor El Shantiri has sent his regrets for today's council meeting. Well, good morning, colleagues and members of the public and the media. Bienvenue à l'Hôtel de Ville. Welcome to our special
Welcome to City.
discuss the 2019 city budget. Today we're pleased to table the draft 2019 budget for consideration and public input. The tabling of the budget, as many of you know, is the single most important discussion we have at the city. C'est la discussion le plus important que nous avons.
This is the most important discussion that we have each year.
And I found that residents often have competing expectations regarding the city's budget. However, they're also realistic about the city's fiscal capacity. They know we have to set a limited number of priorities while, of course, living within our means. This year is particularly challenged given the compressed timeline resulting from the municipal election. I'm pleased to report that we're bringing forward a budget for 2019 that delivers on key commitments, namely reducing our infrastructure gap by boosting our spending on roads and sidewalks, providing more affordable housing, and making our communities safer and more resilient. Avec le budget de 2010,
With the 2019 budget, we are investing more money in our infrastructures, boosting our spending on roads and sidewalks, providing more affordable housing. Je tiens tout d'abord à faire part des points saillants illustrant ce que le budget de 2019 peut faire pour améliorer la vie des résidents d'Ottawa. Suivant les directives du Conseil, nous avons conçu pour 2019 un plan de dépenses qui équilibre les priorités et les besoins déterminants de notre ville en croissance. La semaine dernière, je vous ai parlé de l'état de la ville. Selon un avis répandu, la ville fonctionne à plein régime. Our city is going through a very impressive growth right now.
named Canada's top tech firm. Jobs are being created in record numbers in our rural communities, high-tech, and many other sectors. And our unemployment rate is at a 30-year low. But not everyone benefits equally, and a booming economy is contributing to a housing crunch and a very low vacancy rate. As a city, I believe that we can and should continue to strive to reconcile prosperity and generosity. In fact, a strong community emboldens us to be both a prosperous and a caring community. It also reminds us of our duty to care for our most vulnerable residents. In this spirit, I'm proposing that we as a city make a major investment in housing and homelessness in 2019. This investment will include a $15 million contribution to kickstart new affordable housing units in 2019. This includes $10 million in new capital to the Housing Reserve Fund and $5 million currently available to invest. In addition, I'm also proposing a significant contribution of City of Ottawa lands to further boost the value of the city's affordable housing investment. Nous ferons une contribution importante au
We will make an important contribution to affordable housing in order to help our residents and our families in need.
To use an affordable housing lens when considering any development on transit-oriented developments on city property. Now, just last week, Councillor McKenney, our council liaison on housing and homelessness, and I met with Minister Bill Blair. We outlined our need for financial support as the city has absorbed costs to welcome refugee claimants from the United States since 2017. I am very confident that the Government of Canada will be reimbursing the city for these costs in the coming weeks, and I want to thank Minister Blair and Minister Catherine McKenna for their ongoing support and encouragement on this file. Once this funding is confirmed, it will go into the Housing Reserve Fund to further advance the immediate construction of new affordable units in Ottawa. I will be recommending to Council that every single dollar reimbursed by the Government of Canada for last year's needs be added to our housing new build effort in 2019 on top of our investment of cash and city land. This will result in millions more on top of the $15 million being invested this year alone that I'm proposing. Obviously, the City of Ottawa cannot go it alone in the fight against homelessness. Over the course of the coming weeks, we'll be pushing the province of Ontario and the Government of Canada and our local housing partners to agree on an even more ambitious target that will make an even bigger difference in our local fight against homelessness. Nous devons travailler avec les autres.
We have to work with other levels of government and our partners in order to make progress in housing.
Based on the past practice, we can anticipate that the city's $15 million contribution to housing will leverage at least the equivalent amount of new provincial and federal dollars. These efforts will lead to a significant increase in the number of affordable housing units built in 2019 and 2020. It is our hope to improve construction of over 250 new units in 2019 versus 120 units this past year. Our $15 million investment in 2019 would be the largest municipal contribution to housing capital in the city's history. I look forward to working closely with all members of Council and our Council Liaison on Housing and Homelessness, Catherine McKinney, Mathieu Fleury, Chair of OCH, Jenna Sudds, Chair of Community and Protective Services Committee, and Jan Harder, Chair of Planning, and all members of Council on this key initiative. Ottawa Community Housing, or OCH, is a key city housing partner, and it will soon launch their 10-year plan. I understand that OCH has ambitious goals to leverage available funding to significantly expand the number of affordable units across Ottawa. I commit to work closely and to support OCH and other housing partners to leave no stone unturned in our fight to reduce homelessness. Je veux travailler avec tous nos partenariats.
Would like to work with our partners and consider all options in order to make progress in this file.
Mark of the City of Ottawa's 10-year housing and homelessness plan. Since the introduction of the plan in 2014, we have built 446 units of new affordable housing and supportive housing, with another 442 units in various stages of development. We created 761 new housing subsidies, both rent supplements and housing allowances. And new funding in 28 through the Home for Good program will fund an additional 300 units. In addition, we invested $62 million in social housing repairs, retrofits, and programs to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. There's also the city's Housing First program. Il y a aussi le programme Logement d'abord de la ville.
Also the Housing First program.
Focuses on moving people experiencing homelessness from the streets or shelters directly into permanent housing of their choice with the supports they need. Since April 2015, this program has housed 882 Housing First participants with a very positive 92% housing retention success rate. We'll also be funding over $26 million going to housing and homelessness agencies in 2019 for case management, housing loss prevention, and operating funding for supportive housing. Some of this funding directly supports our 168 people who have exited emergency shelters in 4 different supportive housing projects. Examples include Cornerstone's new 42-unit building for women that opened this past fall, and other projects with Ottawa Solace, Montfort Renaissance, and the John Howard Society. Now, important progress has also been made in childcare in the last year. New provincial and federal investments of $34 million have provided new fee subsidies for approximately 2,000 more children in our city. This is significantly reducing the wait list and providing additional funding to childcare service providers for increased access and affordability for families across all parts of Ottawa. With a cost of living increase in the draft 2019 budget, community funding would benefit from a total investment of $24.2 million for social service providers who deliver valuable services to residents across the city, an increase of almost $500,000. One example of these social service providers is the 14 community houses that deliver services to almost 14,000 children, youth, and their families living in challenged socioeconomic neighborhoods. The city is currently completing a review of community funding in consultation with our community partners so that agencies are better positioned to respond to the growing and emerging needs of residents. We look forward to their recommendations coming forward later this year. Cette revue de financement
This review of community funding will lead to recommendations later in 2019, and I'm looking forward to the results.
Ottawa City Council endorsed the creation of a women and gender equity strategy. The draft budget includes an investment of $210,000, including one staff position to advance equity and inclusion for all. In April 2018, the City also developed an 84-item work plan to improve long-term care facilities and better support our most vulnerable residents, our senior citizens. Approximately 80% of residents living in City long-term care homes suffer from some form of dementia. In May 2018, City Council approved hiring 35 new full-time personal support workers with an investment of $800,000. I'm pleased to say that all of these positions were filled in late 2018. Je suis heureux que nous ayons pu
I'm very pleased that we were able to hire 35 employees so rapidly.
Staffing resulted in over 1,300 additional hours of direct care per week for the 717 residents living in City long-term care homes, bringing the number of hours residents receive to the provincial norm. The 2019 draft budget for the City's long-term care facilities includes major investments to ensure levels of care are consistent with other homes in Ontario. Budget 19 includes $2.8 million for base funding for the 35 personal support workers hired in 2018, $1.2 million to fund 11 full-time positions to support direct resident care, staff supervision, and quality improvements in the homes, $1.2 million in compensation for sick leave, modified duty, and outbreak cover-off to increase staffing to help our seniors, and $650,000 in capital to advance the life cycle replacement of furniture and equipment. These investments will allow us to improve the quality of services and safety of our residents, providing greater confidence and peace of mind for residents and their families. Now, decent, affordable housing is an important part of our ability to feel safe and fully participate in our city's social, economic, and cultural life. There are other ways that your city is investing to keep residents safe. Nous faisons d'autres investissements importants pour garder notre communauté en sécurité. I've laid out a commitment to hire 54 paramedics over the next 4 years. Budget 2019 makes a down payment on this commitment by adding 14 frontline paramedics this year. This will bolster our efforts to reduce wait times in our fast-growing suburbs and rural communities. The budget dedicates $640,000 towards replacing fire equipment and technology systems for our firefighters. Also, I'll maintain my support for the additional 85 new police officers over the course of the coming term, which includes the additional 10 officers Council was asked to fast-track by the Ottawa Police Service in the summer of 2018. We're also providing support to Crime Prevention Ottawa to strengthen ongoing crime prevention initiatives. Now, let me remind members of Council that any major changes to our funding by the Province of Ontario or Government of Canada could impact our ability to maintain our long-range hiring plans. That's why I'm urging Council to exercise a high level of caution in reviewing this year's spending plan. Earlier today, under Councillor Dean's leadership, the Police Service tabled their draft budget, which comes in at 3% on the tax side, plus 1.5% in new tax growth dollars. But to meet the tax goal set by Council, the OPS requires an additional $4.8 million in one-time funding from the City's Tax Stabilization Fund, an additional $450,000 in revenue from 3 additional red light cameras, and $1.7 million in provincial funding for guns and gangs. Now, Council is also aware that the City has had to cover OPS annual deficits for the last 3 years for a total one-time contribution of over $12 million. In the last term of Council, over 60% of the new FTEs in the entire city went to the police service. Plus de 60% des nouveaux employés de la
60% of new employees at the city were sent to Police Ottawa.
Moreover, building safer and resilient communities requires a balanced approach on spending. More boots on the ground will not address the root causes of crime in our many different neighborhoods in the city. And so we must, as a Council, strive to balance the needs across our key priorities. This includes investing in better housing and investing to support our frontline men and women in uniform. When FEDCO meets to consider its budget on March 5th, I'll be recommending that FEDCO reduce the one-time contribution to the OPS from $4.8 million to $2.4 million, and here is how I propose that Council allocate the remaining $2.4 million. The first $2 million gets added to our citywide commitment to fast-track our affordable housing investment. The remaining $400,000 is to be set aside to support community-based initiatives led by our city's nonprofit organizations to deliver programs for at-risk youth in communities throughout the city. The one-year community funding stream will allocate funds to those organizations that have a realistic plan and on-the-ground proven capacity to engage our youth so that we can offer them a lifetime of opportunity, not a lifetime of jail. Nous devons en faire plus pour aider.
We must do more to help our young residents who are in need.
A motion to expedite the introduction of red light cameras from 3 units to 6 units as soon as operationally feasible. By speeding up the introduction of these red light cameras, an additional $450,000 in revenue will be generated. My motion will seek Council's concurrence to allocate the additional revenue to the police service to help offset ongoing operational pressures. These motions are brought forward with an offer of collaboration to the Ottawa Police Service Board to work with the city to find more efficiencies in their budget. I notice Councillor Deans also brought forward a motion to that effect, and I thank her for that. I propose that the city manager and treasurer meet with OPS in the coming weeks to explore opportunities to save money in the back office and to work together on budget solutions to protect our ongoing investment in the hiring of frontline officers. I sincerely believe that our teams can and will work collaboratively to bridge this gap, which represents, by the way, just less than 1% of the OPS budget. We need to explore efficiencies and possible partnerships with the City of Ottawa to eliminate duplication and streamline back office functions. We must take advantage of economies of scale and leverage city expertise in human resources, facilities management, information technology, legal services, payroll, and other supporting functions. I also commit to Council to work closely with the OPS Board to secure more funding from upper levels of government, as has been promised by both the Province of Ontario and the Government of Canada. Today, I urge Council to support this balanced approach to invest in safer and more resilient communities. Je demande à tous mes collègues
I would ask my colleagues to support this healthy approach to make our communities safer.
As a council to keep a sharp focus on our fight against crime while making the key investments in housing and support for youth at risk in our communities. Now, I, like you, knocked on over knocked on over 10,000 doors. Some of you probably knocked on more doors than I did during the last campaign. And I certainly heard loud and clear that people want us to invest more in our city's roads and basic infrastructure, such as sidewalks. La condition
The state of our roads and infrastructures is a priority for several communities.
Investment in roads, bike lanes, sidewalks, and facilities will increase by $9.8 million this year, bringing us to $128.5 million invested in 2019 alone. That's a significant increase of 8% over 2018. In 2019, the road resurfacing budget will be $49 million, up from the yearly average of $35.5 million over the last term of council. This investment in road resurfacing includes $6.6 million for Châtenay Drive, Saint-Joseph Boulevard, and Apollo Way in Orleans, $8.5 million for Anderson Road, Saint-Joseph, and Paget Road in Innis, $2 million for Maryville Road, Clyde Avenue, and Larkspur Drive in College Ward, $3.5 million for Greenbank Road, Meadowlands, Maryville Road, Clyde Avenue, and Fallowfield Road in Knoxdale, Maryville, $5.6 million in the Airport Parkway, Hetherington Road, and Anderson Road in Gloucester Southgate, $1.4 million for Hunt Club Road and a Bronson Avenue off-ramp in River Ward, $2.3 million for Bantry Street, Heron Road, Othello Avenue, and Tremblay Road in Alta Vista, $4.8 million for Dunning Road, French Hill Road, Anderson Road, and Farmers Way in Cumberland Ward, $6.5 million for Mitch Owens Road, Gow Road, River Road, Farmers Way, and Shiloh Crescent in Osgood, and $1 million to surface roads, including Eagleson Road and Hope Side Road in Canada South. Secondly, those are just a small sample of the roads, by the way. Secondly, our rural infrastructure investments will reach $42.7 million in 2019, up from the 4-year average of $39.7 million. For example, our rural investments include $3.8 million to design or construct 42 culverts in Rideau Goulburn, and $4 million to design and build 47 culverts, and $1.6 million to renew the Fitzroy Harbour Bridge in West Carleton March. Now, because of this investment, the existing infrastructure funding gap could be fully addressed within the next 5 years instead of the projected 10 years without adding any new debt to the city budget.
So at this pace, we'll be able to pay down the infrastructure deficit in 5 years.
I urge members of council to stay the course on this priority and get the job done to finally eliminate the infrastructure deficit facing our city. Once approved, the city will also invest $22.9 million in 2019 to start widening Strandhurst to 4 lanes from Maravista Drive to Jockville Road in Barrhaven. Budget 2019 will also allow the city to repair or resurface approximately 150 kilometers of roads across the city. Now, we know that Ottawa has one of the largest municipal transportation networks in Canada. City teams regularly have to clear 6,000 kilometers of road and 2,300 kilometers of sidewalk throughout the city. And we've seen the challenges that our staff and community is facing in the last few days. Maintaining our network is expensive, and that's why Budget 2019 includes a base budget for winter maintenance of $70.8 million, an increase of $2.4 million from 2018. We're also investing in Safer Roads Ottawa, which will purchase and implement an additional automatic license plate recognition device on a police vehicle in 2019. I'd encourage you to call the police and go out on one of those ride-alongs with this particular unit. It's very, very impressive. To date, these 3 active units that we have now, we'll add 1 more, it resulted in 450 suspended, prohibited drivers, the return of 8 stolen vehicles, 695 unlicensed drivers charged, and 3,150 expired license plate tags. This technology
allows us to make progress without adding any employees to the standing budget of the city.
I mentioned the $1.6 million it has generated in revenues for the city. By making permanent the funding for Safer Roads Ottawa, we'll be able to introduce new programs such as the School Bus Stop Arm program, which will start in 2019. This technology, aimed at reducing the number of drivers who dangerously pass stop school buses, will be a first in Ontario. Budget 2019 also includes $1.6 million for traffic calming measure programs, with each councillor receiving $50,000 for road safety initiatives in their community, an increase of 25% over 2018. We'll also review this program to provide better flexibility for local decision-making. There's also $500,000 set aside for pedestrian crossovers in order to improve the safety of pedestrians at key crossings across the city. We'll also act to give flexibility to councillors to fund other locations for pedestrian crossovers using their temporary traffic calm funds, which was a suggestion by Councillor Blais. Budget 2019 also includes 10 more crossing guards where warranted, so we can adequately ensure the safety of our children on their way to and from school. The budget also includes funding for active transportation with an investment in both the Ottawa pedestrian and cycling plan of $7.1 million. Examples of active transportation projects to be funded in 2029 include $4.4 million to implement projects from the Ottawa cycling plan, including the O'Connor Street Bikeway and cycling facilities along Booth Street and Somerset Ward, and $2.5 million to enhance Scott Street for pedestrians, cyclists, and transit users in Kitchissippi. We've also heard from our residents across the city about the need to improve transit, especially in neighbourhoods with growing demands. Budget 2019 is investing $7.8 million to purchase 12 new 40-foot buses to increase the capacity in our transit system. It will also include $5.1 million annually to deliver these service improvements to many communities in all parts of the city. John Manconi and his team have been consulting with councillors on route changes that are required for the opening of LRT, and continue to assess how to best use the new funding to improve service for transit users. The expanded service will provide riders with new connections, faster connections, shorter waiting times, and more capacity throughout the system. Now, OC Transpo customers may not witness all of these improvements simultaneously in their neighbourhood, but they will certainly benefit from some of these enhancements throughout the year. Les usagers de
Public transit users will see these improvements starting in the spring and summer this year.
improvements that are planned and will be finalized in the coming weeks will enhance service in many neighborhoods across the city starting this spring and summer. Transportation staff are currently continuing these discussions with councillors. Now, draft budget 2019 also includes $55.2 million to replace 79 buses that have reached the end of their 15-year life cycle. With the upcoming launch of LRT in our city, we also need to ensure these historic transit investments benefit all residents, including those who need it the most, either to go to work or to get to medical appointments. This is why we introduced the EquiPass and EquiFare in 2017 to offer our low-income residents access to transit services at a deep discount of 50%. And the EquiPass also costs $59.75 monthly, about half the price of Toronto's low-income transit pass, priced at $116. The EquiPass saves eligible users approximately $700 per year. Cette mesure nous permet de bâtir.
This measure allows us to build the type of city that we all want, a city which helps its residents who are in need to use public transport in a more affordable way.
By the end of 2018, more than 11,000 residents had registered as eligible EquiPass users. Now, wanting to do more to help our seniors, who often find themselves on fixed incomes, there is funding in this budget to extend the popular no-charge transit service to Sundays in addition to Wednesdays.
Through this measure, we will assist our seniors who are facing issues of isolation.
Truly believe that this measure will encourage our seniors to get out and be more active, helping them combat the loneliness and isolation that many struggle with on a daily basis. The city will also invest in key parks and community facilities, including but not limited to $1.7 million for parks and facilities, including the John Mille Community Centre, Morgan's Grants Woods, Whalen Park, Devonian Park, and Richardson Ridge Phase 4 Park in Canada North, $2.5 million for Howard McGuire Park, Joe Lewis Park, the Goulburn Rec Complex, Ray McCaffrey Park, Westridge Park, and Fringewood Park in Stittsville, $1 million for Barwell Park, the Carling Family Shelter, George C. Brown Park, Ron Colbus Lakeside Centre, and Woodruff Park in Bayward, $1.2 million for the Earl Armstrong Arena, the Pineview Community Hub, and the Splash Wave Pool in Beacon Hill, Searville, $1.5 million for River Rain Park and Richelieu Vanier, $1.2 million to design and build Oblate's Urban Park and Capitol Ward, and $1.7 to design and build Leitrim Park 2, and $17.4 million for a community center in Gloucester, excuse me, South Nepean, and funds to help improve the condition of the Alexander Community Center as well as Mooney's Bay Pavilion in River Ward. Now, keeping your taxes low and the city affordable has been a priority of mine over the past 2 mandates. I'm proud to have worked with Council to deliver on our commitments to taxpayers over the last 2 terms, delivering 8 budgets with tax increases limited to 2.5% or less. Je suis fier d'avoir respecté.
I am proud to have respected my commitments over the last 8 years.
It's its first budget in the spring of 2019. Now, this provincial budget will most certainly bring change, as we've already heard messages of fiscal restraint from the province. It is clear that we as a city need to be prepared for that change, given the significant impact of the provincial funding in many areas of municipal life. I have always believed in being upfront with residents, and that's why I put forward a tax target of between 2% and 3% during the most recent election. We are addressing citywide priorities by changing our tax goal to no more than 3% in 2019. And for the average Ottawa homeowner, increasing the tax goal from 2% to 3% represents an additional $29 on their property tax bill. Now, I've heard from residents, and I believe they are prepared to contribute that additional amount in order to improve our basic infrastructure. But let me be clear, I'm not on for putting an unsustainable burden on the local property taxpayer to step into the shoes of other levels of government. I have never once met a resident asking me to use their property tax dollars to subsidize the province of Ontario or the federal government, both of whom have much greater fiscal capacity than we do at the municipal level. Aucun résident ne veut payer pour les obligations des autres paliers du gouvernement. Just to put this in context for you, we're currently benefiting from multi-year allocations or apply under approximately 50 federal and provincial government funding programs, and we have approximately 28 active funding requests pending confirmation. That represents over $670 million in federal and provincial funding and grants in 2019. Now, I will continue to work tirelessly to ensure that Ottawa gets its fair share of available funding moving forward. And rest assured that I'll continue challenging city staff and our partner agencies to work hard to find efficiencies whenever possible. Just like families across Ottawa tighten their belt to live within their means, I will ensure that the city continues to do the same. I recently saw a report that says that the average Canadian household will spend an additional $400 this year on groceries. This is due to everything from tariffs to wildfires in California. Une famille moyenne peut s'attendre.
An average family can expect to pay $400 more for food this year.
Are also impacting affordability throughout the city, particularly in the urban core. This is a reminder that we at the city need to be part of the solution to help individuals and families who are struggling with rising costs. This includes seniors on fixed incomes or fixed pensions and young families saving for a down payment on their first home. I want to conclude by thanking all residents and members of council who contribute ideas to the budget 2019 process. Merci à tous nos résidents qui ont contribué.
Thank you to all our residents who contributed to the budget process for 2019.
Vice chairs and committee members for their input to date and for the work ahead to facilitate the respective budgets through their committees. Merci à tous les conseillers et conseillères.
Thank you to all city councillors for their ideas and participation in this budget process.
By thanking my own team in the Mayor's office for working closely with the City Manager and City Treasurer on Budget 2019 and their staffs as mandated by Council. I believe that Budget 2019 strikes the balance between keeping our city affordable and investing in the core services and programs that position Ottawa for continued growth, prosperity, and social inclusion. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And we now have a presentation by our City Treasurer, and we'll hold questions for the City Treasurer until our other boards and agencies come and present as well. So over to you, I believe, Treasurer and Deputy Treasurer. Merci.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Isabel Jasmine, the Deputy Treasurer, will be presenting the budget for you today.
Okay, thank you.
We're not on the screen yet.
I think while we're setting up, Councillor Deroux, you have a motion, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Be it resolved that the Mayor's remarks given at the City Council meeting on February 6, 2019 be appended to the minutes of today's Council meeting.
The motion. Carried. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Tierney.
Do you need There we are. Technical difficulties. There we go. Might as well start.
Okay, we'll start.
Okay.
So today's presentation is an overview of all the budgets, including police, public health, library, and transit. Only a summary is provided here today, as the detailed budgets will be presented individually to each committee, board, and commission. Today's budget reflects the direction approved in December. I will provide an overview of the tax and rate-supported operating budget and capital budget, and will also present the budget timetable for each committee, board, and commission budget meeting. Je présenterai un aperçu du budget.
I will provide an overview of tax-supported and rate-supported budgets, which will be submitted to the boards and commissions.
The property tax bill to no more than 3%. This budget also includes a 3.5% increase to the transit levy, as directed by Council and in line with the Transit Affordability Plan, to increase transit tax at the same rate as operating costs. 2019 will be a transition year for transit as they prepare to launch the Confederation Line. The 3.5% increase will help to address these additional pressures and provide additional service. This budget also reflects a 2.5% increase in transit fares on July 1, 2019, which translates to an effective increase of only 1.25% for the year. The annual additional taxation revenues from new assessment generates an additional 1.5%. The rate budget has been developed with the revenue requirements detailed in the long-range financial plan for rate programs. The average urban residential home valued at $404,000 will see an increase of $113 per year, a rural home $93 per year, and commercial property $238 per year. Une maison résidentielle urbaine moyenne évaluée.
An urban residence will see an increase of $116 per year, a rural residence $80 per year, a commercial property $238 per year. Il s'agit d'un chiffre préliminaire. Le ton réel sera basé sur l'évaluation de la propriété et selon la politique approuvée par le Conseil. Les frais de collecte d'ordures augmentent de $2. Pour la maison moyenne, l'augmentation de 3,3 pour l'eau, 4,2 pour les eaux usées et 10,8 pour les eaux pluviales, avec une augmentation de 4,8 au total. Pour la maison moyenne aussi, il y aura une augmentation sur 3 ans qui représente 65% des frais d'escompte moyens. We have an overall budget of $3.6 million. If you look at the graphs here, you can see the increase in the various services provided by the city. The 5 main services represent 65% of the total budget. Social and recreation services, transit services, 575, water and garbage collection, as well as the capital.
7.9% of the total budget. In 2019, community and social services has the largest share at 19.8%, transit second at 15.9%, water, sewer, solid waste third at 13.5%, police services in fourth at 9.5%, and capital formation at 9.2%. The capital contribution shown here is just for the tax-supported budgets. There is also an additional $162 million within the rate-supported budgets number for a total of $493 million cash contribution to capital. This includes the additional $9.8 million approved in the directions report to continue to reduce the infrastructure gap for tax-supported capital.
They're looking at the English on the screen.
Oh, okay.
On the
Should we
little
wait? Okay. This next graph shows the sources of funding for the $3.6 billion. User fees and service charges of $881 million, which includes the revenue from the water bill and property taxes of $1.8 billion, are the main sources of revenue to support the operations of the city. Property taxes and payment in lieu of taxes make up more than 52% of the city's revenues. The $704 million shown for the federal and provincial funding represents all the grants that are directed toward particular services, such as social services, child care, long-term care, and others. These conditional grants are not available to use for any other purpose. FTE summary. This slide shows the staffing requirements changes for the 2019 budget. Community and social services would increase by 47 FTEs to address requirements for 35 personal support workers and 11 frontline support staff. There is also an increase of 14 paramedics to help maintain response times across the city. 50% of the cost is funded from provincial revenue. The increase for Ottawa Police Service includes 30 additional officers for traffic enforcement, violence against women, and community policing. There are also increases in public works to maintain new or expanded infrastructure. And the reductions in transit FTEs are the result of the transition to light rail in 2019. This is a net reduction of 108 FTEs that takes into account the reduction of bus operators, offset by addition of rail and bus service expansion resource requirements. The funding capacity that has been created as a result of tax increases, user fee increases, and revenue that we are receiving from other levels of government totals $8.5 million. $85.1 million, thank you. La capacité de financement créée par les augmentations.
The funding capacity that are attributed to these items to give a total of $85 million.
The 3% overall tax revenue increase plus the 3.5% increase in the transit levy generates another $49.6 million. User fees and charges are $6.9 million, including the 2.5% transit increase on July 1st. This reflects regulatory inflationary increases to fees and additional interest earnings. The increase of matching funding from provincial cost sharing is $4.9 million, primarily to cover paramedics and employee and social services. In developing the draft budget, one of the first steps is to review the previous year where there were cost or revenue increases or decreases that we had not anticipated but are of a permanent nature. These are adjusted and any one-time revenues are removed. This table shows the key factors from 2018 that will have an impact in 2019. FTEs that were partially funded last year need to be funded for a full year in 2019. This annualization is primarily for the 35 personal support workers for long-term care and the 14 new paramedics in 2018. In 2018, $1 million of one-time funding was directed to the asphalt or pothole repair program, and in 2019, we are now adding $950,000 in base funding to maintain that funding going forward. The vacancy tax rebate program ended in 2018, resulting in $6.9 million no longer being required. $3.7 million in penalties, interest, investment income, and provincial offenses revenue was added to reflect the fact these sources of revenue have increased. There's also a $6.2 million adjustment to transit operations to reflect efficiency savings, and $4.85 million in various one-time reversals and funding adjustments, such as the $1 million for pothole repairs. Next, we identify the cost to maintain the services that we are already providing. Labor costs, as usual, are the largest increase overall, and this is to be expected given the fact that 47% of overall costs in the city are related to labor. The inflation in materials and contracts is budgeted at $20.7 million. Per the directions report that was approved by Council, we are contributing $9.8 million towards infrastructure renewal to accelerate the time frame required to close the infrastructure funding gap over the next 5 years. This $9.8 million equates to 1% of the citywide tax. The inflationary increase for capital renewal funding is the contribution to capital to keep up with inflation and ensure that we are not losing ground in terms of what is needed for capital spending. The inflation factor used for 2019 is 6%, which is in line with the Ottawa Construction Price Index increase last year. The infrastructure gap that was identified in the 2017 Long-Range Financial Plan for tax-supported capital. At the time of the report, annual funding for tax-supported capital was $125 million, but the need was $195 million, leaving an annual funding gap of $70 million. Since then, we have reduced that gap to 50. The $9.8 million that is included in the 2019 budget gets added to the capital contribution base budget, and if we continue this way, each subsequent budget adds an additional $9.8 million to the base with no new debt until the remaining $50 million annual funding gap is eliminated in 2024. The costs of growth are $22 million. The budget includes an additional $6.5 million contribution to the housing reserves to be used for affordable housing capital investments. Combined with the $8.5 million in various existing reserves, such as the Housing Reserve, Development Charge Reserve, and the IAH Fund, this results in a potential total investment in affordable housing to $15 million. This can supplement any additional funds received by the federal and provincial governments. $1.5 million is added to the winter maintenance budget to maintain the approximately 200 linear kilometers of new roads, 50 linear kilometers of sidewalks being added in 2019. $1.2 million to long-term care for the additional 11 support staff, and $1.1 million for additional paramedics. There's also an additional $700,000 for solid waste for growth in the number of households for curbside and multi-residential waste pickup. The $1.2 million for traffic, red light camera, and parks growth includes the 10 additional school crossing guards and 3 additional red light cameras. There is $6.2 million for the additional police officers and support staff at police services. As per the long-range financial plan, there's an additional $1 million contribution to capital for renewal of assets, taking into account growth in the asset base. The $2.1 million for transit is primarily for bus service expansion. The revenue increase proposed for the rate services is 4% for water, 5% for wastewater, and 13% for storm services as identified in the long-range financial plan. The increase in revenue is projected to be $20.4 million and is based on a slightly higher water consumption projection of 8.4 million cubic meters versus the 81 million budgeted in 2018. Like the tax budget, the rate budget has to be balanced, and this additional revenue is offset by additional expenditures. The increase of $3.1 million to maintain operations is primarily for compensation and benefits, increases and inflation on materials and supplies. The capital contribution is increasing by $17.3 million for all services in total, which is in line with the long-range financial plan for rate-supported capital. Because this is such a capital-intensive service, the most significant increase is in the contribution to capital. We will now look at the capital budgets. The capital budget reflects various plans approved by Council, including the Transportation Master Plan, the Development Charges Background Study, and the LRFP 5 that assessed the state of repair of all the capital assets and recommended a plan for closing the infrastructure gap. These plans have all been incorporated into the proposed capital budget for 2019. Debt is used in this budget within the limits established by Council. Debt servicing is forecasted to be 4.4% of revenues on the tax side and 13% on the rate side for 2019. Total debt is projected to be $2.486 billion at the end of 2019. This is in line with the long-range financial plans. The tax-supported capital budget for 2019 includes transit, police services, and library. The budget totals $767 million. As mentioned earlier, this budget reflects the recommendations from the long-range financial plans for tax and rate, increasing contributions to capital to reduce the infrastructure gap over the next 5 years for tax and for rate. 19% of the investments are in transit, 23% for water, wastewater, and stormwater services, and 20% for integrated roads projects, which represented 13% last year. This reflects the increased investments in roads. The proposed $767 million capital budget is funded from a variety of sources, but basically it is cash and debt. The reserves portion, which is cash, is funded from contributions to capital on both the tax and rate side. This makes up 62% of the funding for capital. There is also development charge, cash, and debt for fund growth projects. In total, there's $150.5 million in new debt authority that is required to fund the proposed 2019 capital program. The next 2 slides break down the capital spending to a lower level of detail for tax and rate between renewal, growth, and regulatory or service enhancement initiatives. For tax-supported capital, the total authority is $503 million. 62% of this new authority is for renewal, 26% for growth, and 12% for other initiatives. 64% of this amount will be funded from capital reserves or cash, and 17% from debt. The remainder will come from government funding and development charges. For rate-supported capital, the total authority is $264 million. 80% of rate capital investments are for renewal of assets, and only 19% for growth, and 1% for other initiatives. More than 59% of the $264 million will be funded from capital reserves or cash, and 25% from debt. This slide provides a forecast for the 2019 year-end reserve balances. This reserve structure has been revised to reflect the new format, combining the operating reserves and capital reserves by source of funds. The tax stabilization reserve is a combination of previous reserves such as the winter maintenance, child care, self-insurance, and election reserves. Budget reserves overall are projected to decrease slightly from $426.4 million to $401 million. Significant decreases for the transit, and this is only because we have been building the reserves in transit in anticipation for the city share of the spending that will be required in 2019 for light rail. Lastly, on the budget timetable, we have the committee, board, and commission budget meetings scheduled on February 14th, running until March 5th. It is at these meetings that individuals can ask about particular items in the budget. All the information is available on the website, and the public is invited to come out to a committee meeting to discuss what is of concern to them. To provide comments on the draft budget, residents can email budget@ottawa.ca or contact their local ward councillor. Council will meet on March 6th to consider the draft budget and any recommendations stemming from the committee, commission, and board budget meetings, and then it is at this point that the budget will be adopted. In conclusion, Mr. Mayor, I want to offer my thanks to senior management and staff that have supported this budget process, in particular the finance staff for their hard work and dedication throughout the year, but particularly at budget time. Thank you.
I'd like to thank the Deputy City Treasurer for a presentation, and now moving on to a motion to introduce reports. Councillor Leeper. Councillor Leeper.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies. First motion to introduce reports, I assume. That the rules of procedure be suspended to receive and table the following reports, as these reports relate to the 2019 draft operating and capital budgets being tabled at this meeting. 1, the report from the Deputy City Treasurer, Corporate Finance, entitled Draft 2019 Operating and Capital Budgets. 2, the report from the Committee of Adjustment, entitled 2019 Draft Operating Estimates, Committee of Adjustment. 3, the report from Crime Prevention Ottawa, entitled Crime Prevention Ottawa 2019 Draft Budget. 4, the report from the Ottawa Police Services Board, entitled Ottawa Police Services Board 2019 Draft Operating and Capital Budgets. 5, the report from the Ottawa Public Library Board, entitled Ottawa Public Library 2019 Draft Budget Estimates. 6, the report from the Ottawa Board of Health, entitled 2019 Draft Operating Budget for the Ottawa Board of Health, and that the rules of procedure be suspended to receive and consider the following reports, as they provide information supplemental to the 2019 budget reports being tabled at this meeting. 1, the report from the General Manager of Service Innovation and Performance, entitled FTE Analysis Report, information supplemental to the budget estimates. And 2, the report from the Director of Fleet Services, entitled 2019 Vehicle and Equipment Plan, information supplemental to the budget estimates.
Okay, so on the motion, carried, adopté. Thank you, Ms. Jasmine, for the presentation. We're now on to Committee of Adjustment. Draft Operating Estimates Committee of Adjustment. No presentation. Received and table. Received. Crime Prevention Ottawa, 2019, Prévention du crime Ottawa, budget pour fonctionnement préliminaire 2019. No presentation. Receive and table. Received. Ottawa Police Services Board. Ottawa Police Services Board 2019 Draft Operating Budget and Capital Budgets. Commission de Services Policiers d'Ottawa Budget Préliminaire.
Police Services Commission Budget.
Chief Bordelow and Director General Fraser with a presentation. So just to remind members of Council, we'll come back for general high-level questions of a technical nature to the city staff. But after the police presentation, library and health board, you can ask those groups, again, high-level questions. We're not getting into the details. That's to be done at committee. So Councillor Deans, welcome. Good morning. Bienvenue.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, colleagues. Before we get to the budget, I do want to take a quick moment to recognize that at our last Ottawa Police Services board meeting, our chief gave official notice of his retirement this May. Chief Bordelot has had a distinguished policing career spanning 35 years. The chief has led our city through a number of difficult files, and I want to thank him for his dedicated service to this city and to its residents. And at this morning's Police Services budget meeting, it was made official that Director General Deborah Fraser will also be leaving her post at the end of April. So I also want to thank Deborah for her dedication and valuable service to the Ottawa Police Service. We will miss both of these leaders, and I guess next year I'll be sitting up here by myself. Now, before I hand over the budget presentation to Chief Bordelot, I want to take the opportunity to provide my colleagues with a bit of context. The Ottawa Police Services Board gave the chief direction to bring us back a real budget, a budget that shows what investments are needed to keep our community safe, and that is what will be presented to you this morning. As the chair of Crime Prevention Ottawa, it's the other hat I wear, I recognize that investments in prevention are an important part of community safety. CPO has also requested additional funds. I welcome the Mayor's acknowledgement this morning of the very real and urgent need, especially related to youth programming and housing. We can all appreciate the difficult task that police services face, and it is important that we understand the reality of our city. It is also our responsibility to ensure that everything has been done to mitigate the overall police requirements on the city budget to the extent possible. That is why this morning, when this budget was tabled at the Ottawa Police Services Board meeting, I gave direction to the chief to bring back a budget options list to our Finance and Audit Committee meeting later this month. We will strive to meet the Mayor's suggestion of reducing the budget ask by $2.4 million. The direction specifically outlines that these options cannot impact our frontline police services, but it will give us a chance to sharpen our pencils and see what opportunities are available. There are many competing priorities in a city like ours, but there can be no greater priority than keeping our residents safe. With the escalation in street violence, our community expects no less. I invite all of you to attend our Finance and Audit Committee meeting on February 20th, where we will look at that options list and deliberate over the budget and make a recommendation. I will now ask the Chief and Director General Deborah Fraser and Jeff Letourneau to walk Council through the Ottawa Police 2019 budget.
Thank you, Chair Deans. Good morning, bonjour à tous, and just to
good morning to all.
Privilege to serve this community for 35 years, and a distinct pleasure to serve as your chief for the past 7 years. And to Deborah Fraser as well, thank you for your service. It's been an honor to serve with you. We are pleased to be here today to table the 2019 draft budget to the City Council. The context in which we police is always changing locally as well as at the provincial and national level. Our members work in an increasingly fluid and difficult environment. I'm proud of their work. They make a difference each and every day to protect all of us. We see the complexity of their job in almost every area we work. There are changing crime and social disorder issues at neighborhood levels and new demands for service. We are seeing new legislative and oversight trends impact the work we do and adding work pressures. Societal and demographic changes have led to new and changing training requirements, new types of equipment, and new investigative techniques. Trust in policing and community perceptions continue to be an issue requiring an investment in resources to work with our community. We are enhancing our approach to community policing. I want to reiterate to Council and the public on our commitment to community policing, an approach that we are legislated to employ. However, we have heard clearly and recognized that we have a gap which we are addressing. Our business plan is used to ensure that we are identifying and adapting to the trends we see and that we stay focused on our strategic priorities. The reality is that these changes usually require more police intervention, training, and equipment. Very rarely do we see our responsibilities reduced. Even the legalization of cannabis required an increase in training of drug recognition experts and others who can spot impaired driving on our roads. Without the necessary investments upstream, police are one of the public institutions impacted by having to respond to social disorders 24/7. It's my job as your Chief of Police to put forward a budget that prepares our service to meet the challenges of our community both now and into the future. And I believe we have done that. This budget provides us with the resources we need to continue to take on gun violence, to respond to emergencies like tornadoes or mass casualty events like we saw in January. It also ensures that we have the members ready to deploy for large-scale searches for missing people. As you've heard, one of our priorities in this budget is to enhance our capacity to deal with neighborhood-based issues, to address traffic concerns, and to ensure that we are properly staffing our investigative units that deals with violence against women. We will continue to need to manage large-scale protests and events, and we will also continue to be required to deal with increasing needs related to mental health and substance use disorder. Our service is made up of almost 2,000 individuals who are committed to the safety and security of our community. I have named just a few of the functions that they do in service to our community. And a significant component of our 2019 budget pressures involves maintaining services. There is also a need to respond to demands for enhancing our services. We are also addressing historical budget-based shortfalls, adding a small front desk civilian casual pool to deal with peak volumes for collision reporting. We want to continue supporting our members by continuing progress made on our member wellness initiative. We continue to move forward with the board-approved conducted energy weapon expansion, the modernization roadmap, the radio project, and our facility strategic plan. We are also managing our fleet costs and continue our work plans associated with our equity, diversity, and inclusion programs and our trust in policing initiative. I'll now ask Director General Fraser to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Chief. I wanted to just draw a small kind of map to ensure that we were all on side and understood the funding proposal and the 3% budget being tabled. And the discussions that happened between city staff and OPS staff were results of the budget direction that we received from the board when we tabled the budget. And at that time, we had identified an $18 million requirement. The chief had been quoted as saying that was a 5.1% tax increase. And at that time, staff were given direction to meet with the city treasurer and to have a look at other funding options that might be available to mitigate that tax increase and bring it into a 3% level. So 3 sources of revenue were identified. The first one is revenue from the additional red light cameras being installed as part of a Go Forward program. That's what will contribute ongoing revenue of $0.5 million this year and probably grows in the future. One-time withdrawal of $4.8 million from the tax stabilization reserve, and a grant that we received from the province, from the feds through the province, can be booked for $500,000 in 2019. So together, that's $5.8 million worth of revenue, and it's reduced the budget ask from 5.1% to 3%. But it's a key part of what we placed in front of you. And as you can hear from the discussion, we've been directed to go back and look to see how we can refine that even further using efficiencies and other program requests. So we'll be doing that in the coming week. Now I'd like to have a look at, walk you through the complete budget. This summarizes it on a page, and we adopt the format that the city uses too. You can see then that it's been tabled at 3%. We'll go through the one-time funding that helps support that. But at the end of the day, it's a $12.2 million increase to the police budget. when we look at the maintain category, for us then, that $12.2 million is really required to maintain services. That includes inflation across our expenses and supplies, base budget stabilization, and by that I mean we've identified some areas that have been persistently contributing to the deficit for the past several years, and we'd like to see them corrected. As well, the board has approved some programs that continue this year, and the chief identified a couple of them, including the expansion of conducted energy weapons to all members. The ongoing red light camera revenue is acknowledged there. So at the end of the day, it's roughly $12.1 million that's required this year to maintain the level of police service. Enhancement of police service comes about primarily through the 30 officer increase. That's a $3.7 million impact. It includes both the 2019 complement of 30 who begin in the fall, and as well as the annualization costs from the 2018 group, so that we have a full year of salary for them. Our modernization roadmap is, we're working very closely with city staff on the roadmap. The back office area aligns nicely. We're trying to take advantage of the SAP, the city's SAP roadmap, and to adopt their processes and systems so that in the future we have a lot more flexibility about who would do what functions for who, and it opens up the opportunity for OPS to transfer functions over to the city. We have a $0.1 million increase that comes about as the inflation add to current user fees, and at the end of the day then it's the one-time funding from the tax stabilization reserve which would bring us to 3%. The capital side of the budget is quite simple. We generally we're in the $30 to $40 million range when we have projects like the South facility, and you see phase 2 of the South at $18.2 million. That brings us up then above our usual kind of capital budget level. The South facility be funded primarily from debt. The remainder of our projects, the replacement of assets at about $8.4 million, and our strategic initiatives, which are the projects that help move us forward, they're funded from pay-as-you-go. So this year, the capital budget would be $37.2 million. That concludes our look at the budget, and we're happy to take any questions directed our way.
Okay, thank you very much. And as Councillor Deans mentioned, to both you, Chief Bordelot, and Director General Fraser, thank you for your decades of service to first the Gloucester Police and then the Ottawa Police, and as our Chief and Director General. We wish you the very best. I just spoke with Chuck, and I said I know he looks forward every year to coming to budget. It's like going to the dentist, I think was the reply. So we have, these are very high-level questions. Don't get into the weeds, folks. The clerk's memo indicated anything of a technical nature, and then we will go on to our next report, and then we have plenty of time at committee to dive into the documents which have been sent to your offices electronically. Councillor Eglai.
Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Chair and Chief. I had a bit of a sneak preview, if you will, earlier this morning of the budget, and so first of all, I want to thank the Chair and the Chief for bringing the direction and accepting the direction, because I think the budget as proposed is not sustainable at the rate that's proposed. I don't think it's sustainable to take from the tax stabilization fund even before effectively the budget year has started. I think we need to find a better way, a more sustainable way going forward, rather than payments over the next 3 years and a proposed tax rate of 4.1% increase. But again, I'm very heartened by the fact the Chief and I had discussions the other day, and I think, as my mom used to say, if there's a will, there's a way, and I think there's definitely a will here. My question has to go to the direction provided or given by Councillor Deans earlier this morning and referenced in your comments, and that is, as part of that direction, will we get a complete breakdown for review and discussion of all the options that you have looked at, whether you agree with them or not? In other words, will we see everything that was put on the table so we can have a fulsome discussion of all the alternatives that may be out there?
Your Worship, we will be presenting a list to FAC that talks about all the options, those that we agree with and those that we will caution against, and we will have that fulsome discussion with FAC.
Well, I appreciate that, because I think in these kinds of circumstances, we need as much information as we can have on the table so we can find that sustainable way forward. So thank you for that.
Right, thank you, Councillor Englai. Councillor Shirelli, please, high-level issues.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay, in a small part of my ward, Bell's Corners, we had 2 shootings and a murder in the space of 10 days. And the public was, during the election, was clearly calling for enhanced police service to be one of the 3 top priorities. So here today we hear that the 12 million plus is basically a maintain budget. So I'm wondering how within this you have the flexibility to address the needs associated with that kind of activity.
Mr. Mayor, one of the issues that we heard loudly is a gap in service with respect to working closer with our community and identifying community issues. And I'm pleased to report that part of the 30 growth in 2019 includes 10 officers and the striking up of a community response team that will be dealing with neighborhood-based issues to complement the work that our community police center officers are doing, our patrol officers, our pivot team that works on guns and gangs issues. They will be added to that complement of officers to be able to work on community-based solutions. And then in 2020, that will grow with another
gender lens. This is a big part of that. I attended consultation at Bayshore this past summer and heard loud and clear about concerns. Has this been taken into consideration when you've done your budgeting?
Mr. Mayor, I can assure you that gender audit, which identified some systemic issues within the police service, we've made a number of modifications to our policies dealing with transfers and promotions to ensure a more equitable workplace, to ensure that every member of our police service has access to those opportunities. And that has been met, as you've probably seen in the news, with some resistance, but we continue to move forward to ensure that all our members are treated equitably with respect to those opportunities. Part of the budget as well is we formalized our Office for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, where we have 2 full-time staff members at this point, and that initiative is a pillar of our new business plan moving forward as far as the work we're doing on those pieces, and Deputy Chief Uday Jaswal will be leading that work. We've also done we're in the midst of doing a diversity audit to ensure that our racialized officers also don't feel as though there aren't any systemic issues. On the recruiting front as well, we continue to advance, ensure that we are attracting and outreaching to women and racialized members and Indigenous members of our community to make sure that we continue to be more proactive in reflecting the community we serve.
Thanks, Councillor Kavanaugh. Councillor Blais, please. High-level issues.
Yeah, thanks. I was surprised to see that you're taking the revenue from the red light cameras, and I'm wondering, I don't recall the expense for the red light cameras coming out of the police budget.
Worship, the issuance or allocation of the red light camera revenues came as a result of discussions with city staff